Alright, so today I want to talk about Peppered Corydores, and this is just going to be a small little guide just to get started. So a favorite among aquarists is the Corydora. They're a very popular choice for a peaceful community tank, and without getting too technical, there are many different species of Corydoras to pick from. So some have slightly different requirements than others, but today I want to focus on the ones that I occasionally breed, which is the Peppered Corydoras. So let's go over the difference between males and females first. To sum this up quickly, the males are smaller than the females, and the females are larger and fatter. Since cories are tropical fish, most species prefer temperatures from 70 to 82 degrees, but peppers in particular seem to prefer this temperature on the lower end of this scale. Tank size? I would prefer to see these fish in a bigger tank since they tend to get bigger than other species of Corydoras. I mean, look at this chunk right here. She's huge. So mine currently live in a 29-gallon, but I would like to upgrade this since I have a large and growing shoal, and I think a 29-gallon is getting a little too small for these Corydoras. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I love how I was looking some stuff up on cories, and every time I type in cories, it would try to correct me to calories. It's like, okay. Alright, so these are social fish and they feel safer in numbers. So at the minimum, I would keep 5 per species, although some places would suggest even 6 as the minimum. But the more you have, typically the happier and more active they're going to be. And substrate, this is a controversial topic. So many people will panic if they see cories on coarse sand. Well, I believe they should be kept on sand since it's easier for them to sift around without hurting themselves. The biggest offender of the barbels seems to be the water quality. So you see a lot of people really going off about how your substrate's going to affect the barbels on these fish. And that's like the whiskers on them. But the thing is, most of the time if you see damage from that, it's going to be from poor water quality. So if you see damage or wearing down of these, please check your water parameters and just make sure everything's okay and that the fish don't seem sick. So as far as coarse sand goes, I've never had any issues with things like, you see a lot of people complaining about the black diamond blasting sand too, but I've kept them on this many times and I've never once seen a problem with it. In fact, some of my healthiest cories have been kept on that. But overall, you are probably best sticking to sand substrates for this species as opposed to gravel. It is easier on them. Alright, pH. Just like the range in temperatures, cories seem to prefer a pH that ranges from 6 to 8. But once again, the peppers seem to prefer the lower end of this range. I don't recommend throwing chemicals in your tank to change the pH because this can often do more damage than good. But this should all be okay if your tank is balanced. Alright, this one the cories are gonna like. Food! So feeding this bottom-dwelling species is pretty easy. Mine are always happy to check out what other fish are eating. But mine love to eat a variety of frozen foods and fish pellets, and worms are a huge favorite of Corydoras. But the fish waste isn't even safe from these guys. They're just very hungry little dudes. Alright, and next we have the tank mates. So cories are pretty passive fish and thus are not very aggressive, and they'll be much happier with other peaceful species such as ember tetras, cherry shrimp, nerite snails, and all kinds of stuff like that. I did have mine with some Buenos Aires tetras, and they seemed to be kind of, they weren't bullies, but I think they picked at their dorsal fins a little bit, so just be careful what you house them with. But overall, this is a beautiful speckled species, and you can find so much color on their bodies if you look closely. If you don't have any cories and have an appropriate tank for them, please do yourself a favor and pick some up. They're not hard to get breeding either, especially the peppers, but you will not regret Corydoras. Alright, bonus! We're going to talk about breeding just for a quick second here. So, I'm going to link a couple videos in the description just for more thorough, in-depth talk about breeding of them. I just want to go over this really quickly. Alright, so first I usually do a small water change and I add slightly cooler water to simulate the rainy season, which is their breeding season. and this usually stimulates them to start corying around. So, okay, that was terrible. Alright, here's some breeding behavior. And after they've laid their eggs, I use a razor and I gently get these eggs off the glass. Or if they lay it on a piece of plant, which is very common in a planted tank. So if you have plants, just check around on those leaves and you might find eggs. And if they choose plants, then you can just like trim a piece of that plant off and get it out that way. But be careful if you do this and watch for snails and snail eggs. You really don't want them in your hatching jar or wherever you're gonna hatch your fish out. You don't want snails in there because they will eat them. So I waited for this Corydora to pick a spot to lay her eggs, and she picked the filter intake, and I can't get them now. So I took the filter intake out and tried to get them out, but yeah, I lost them. I didn't get them from there, so yeah. But typically they're laying them on the glass or in the plants. But I usually use a dropper, syringe, pipette to add methylene blue into the jar where I place the eggs. And I just add enough to keep the water a light bluish tone. This will help keep fungus at bay and all of that fun stuff. So after this, I'll add an air pump to keep water circulating, which too helps with the fungus situation. And once the eggs hatch, the babies get moved out of the dye and into the regular water, and sometimes I keep them in like a breeding box in the tank, but okay, this is really important. If you're gonna do them in a breeding box, try to use one of those acrylic boxes. Don't use the mesh because bottom dwellers tend to get stuck in those at the bottom. I've had it happen before, and I rigged one up so this wouldn't happen, and it's just more trouble than it's worth. So I really recommend doing an acrylic box if you're gonna use a breeding box, or you could just use a small little tank to raise them in and all of that. So once the eggs hatch, the babies, when they get moved out of the dye into the water, and at first they'll absorb their egg sac for food, and during this time they don't really need to be fed because they're going to be getting their nutrients from that egg sac. But once this sac is absorbed, you'll want to feed something like first bites, and baby brine shrimp is often fed, but I've been reading lately, I usually use this, but I've been reading lately that they have trouble digesting it. I need to look into this more. If this is a concern, you can also do something like microworms. So I'm gonna start getting a culture of those going soon for when I raise more, which I'm working on right now. So overall, getting these guys to breed isn't really that difficult. And again, I will have videos in the description that have more in-depth information on breeding Corydoras. So yeah, check those out, and I will see you in the next video, and thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, and if you want to, go ahead and check out some of my other videos. I'm working on putting more like reviews and care guides up right now, so just bear with me as I figure out scheduling for this channel and all of that. But anyways, take care, happy fish keeping, see ya!